Good morning, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your first video blog of the day for Saturday, November 22nd, 2014, around 8:02 in the morning in Belleville, Massachusetts. It's a nice and sunny day out, but very cold. Right now it's about 20 degrees, and it's supposed to get up to like around 35 or so. Still a little bit windshield factors, could be in the 20s and teens. Some news to report. The Boston Bruins beat the Columbus Blue Jackets in a shootout by the score of 4-3. The Bruins play tonight against their rivals, the Montreal Canadiens, at the TD Garden. Also, the Memphis Grizzlies beat Boston Celtics by the score of 117-100. The Grizzlies have the best record in the NBA so far this year at 11-2. And the UMass Lowell Riverhawks hockey team tied Notre Dame by the score of 2-2. And that's about it on the news. And some history that happened today, 30 years ago today. Nature Boy Ric Flair beat the American Dream Dusty Rhodes in the main event at Starrcade 1984 with Smoking Joe Frazier as the guest referee. The match was stopped due to Rhodes bleeding. Flair retained the NWA World Championship. Starrcade 84 was not as successful as Starrcade 83, and that's going to be a future video blog. The history of Starrcade will be in two parts coming Monday. And also 24 years ago today, The Undertaker made his WWE debut at the Survivor Series pay-per-view in Hartford, Connecticut. And that's about it on that. And today, my first subject of the day is something that happened in American history 51 years ago today. It was a day that would live in infamy. It was a day that the 35th President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated in Dallas, Texas by Lee Harvey Oswald. It was one of the most saddest days in American history, and it was one of the most scariest days in American history because it was just so scary to see the president get assassinated and shot. John F. Kennedy was the youngest president ever elected in the United States of America. He was born in Massachusetts. He was the first Roman Catholic president. A lot of people thought Kennedy had high hopes for his presidency. He had a lovely wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, and two young children, Caroline and John F. Kennedy Jr. It was a perfect thing for America, for the Kennedys in the White House. It was like Camelot and stuff like that. And the background on this, for the thing that JFK and Jackie Kennedy came to Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963, and they were greeted by the governor of Texas, John Connally, and his wife, and they had a motorcade that went through the streets of Dallas, Texas. Downtown Dallas, Texas was a nice day, and President Kennedy ordered the motorcade to be open because it was such a nice day in Dallas, Texas, and there were so many people cheering for JFK and turning the corner. When they came to the Texas School Book Depository, the First Lady of Texas said to John F. Kennedy, "It doesn't mean that all the people in Texas loves you." And then that was the last words JFK said. And then after that happened, there were 3 shots that rang from the Texas School Book Depository. 3 shots. And it wounded John Connally, and it fatally wounded JFK. 3 shots to the head. Boom, boom, boom. JFK was rushed to the hospital when he was pronounced dead at Parkland Hospital at minutes after the assassination. This was very, very scary. Back then in 1963, there was no iPhones and stuff, and there was no press following him, no media press, because they didn't have the technology back then. And a few minutes later, the news chat, the networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, those were the only 3 main networks that had news back then. There was no cable TV, no CNN, no Fox News, no MSNBC, no nothing. It was just ABC, NBC, and CBS, and they had to daytime program saying this is a bulletin that the president was severely wounded. They didn't want to tell that the president passed away because details were very sketchy back in 1963 because the technology wasn't as readily available at that time. And then a few minutes later, all the networks preempted their programming and had so many non-stop news coverage of the assassination of JFK and stuff like that. And after that was official, they had Walter Cronkite on CBS News has said the official word that John F. Kennedy passed away at Parkland Hospital at 12:43 Central Standard Time 1 hour ago. And Walter Cronkite was hearing back tears and stuff. He showed a lot of composure by doing that. I think NBC had a few of the reporters that called into NBC headquarters in New York from Dallas, Texas, because there was no cell phones. They had to use pay phones and stuff like that. And this was the first time of a major news event on television, and they were doing the best they can with the technology because it was very limited to show it to the assassination because they didn't have the technology back then. About an hour later, Lee Harvey Oswald flees the scene, and they had to take a head count of the Texas School Book Depository who was in there because of what happened. But there was one that was not accounted for, Lee Harvey Oswald, and then he ran as fast as he could, and then about a few minutes later, police officer J.D. Tippit questioned him and saying what happened. Lee Harvey Oswald shoots J.D. Tippit and kills him. So it's sad. And then he flees. About an hour later, the police and the FBI catch Lee Harvey Oswald in a movie theater and arrest him on the spot. And then he's getting for questioning, and it's just one of the most scariest things of all time. Many people thought when JFK got assassinated, this could have been the start of World War III. They don't know who was involved in it, and to this day we don't know. Anybody doesn't know what happened. There's say rumors about a conspiracy, rumors about this and that, rumors about the Russians, the Cubans, all stuff. We will never find out the truth. I think it was a conspiracy, but I can't speculate who did it. But it's a long story. But this was a very, very sad day in American history. Very sad. It's probably one of the most saddest days in U.S. history of all time. It ranks up there with Pearl Harbor and the 9/11 attacks. And this was a very sad day. A lot of people were crying and stuff because a president who was so youthful and so hopeful and had a young family gone before his time, and it was one of the most saddest days in the United States history. All of the major networks did not even go off the air for four days. They showed it from the confirm of his death to his JFK's funeral. 4 days later, they showed all of it. They even showed the time when Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald a few days later. That was the first time a shooting was caught on videotape on live television. And then Lee Harvey Oswald passed away a few minutes later. It's sad, But seeing the things over and over again with the JFK's assassination on the news reporting for 1963 was pretty amazing, considering the technology at the time was very limited. And this is probably one of the most saddest days in American history, and people should never forget 11/22/1963 is the day that Camelot was over for the country, and it was a day that we lost our president, John F. Kennedy, probably one of the most charismatic and popular presidents of all time. Rest in peace, JFK. You're a Massachusetts resident. It's words you cannot describe it. And that's about it on that. I'll be back later, Facebook friends and YouTube followers, with 2 more video blogs about the Batman television series, and then the Randy Macho Man Savage Crush feud in the WWE from 1993 to 1994, which will be a very interesting thing. And next week, some video blogs are coming for the history of the NWA WCW Supercard pay-per-view Starrcade. I'm going to do it in 2 parts. The first part will be 1983 through 1989, the NWA version of Starrcade, and then from 1990 to 2000, the WCW Starrcade. And there'll be more, and then the personality profiles will be about this week. There'll be tomorrow will be Mike Greenwell on Sunday, Monday Bob Cousy, Tuesday Jerry Cheevers, and Wednesday Ty Law. Doing it for like kind of Boston sports figures this month, and next month I'll do it for other famous sports figures and stuff. And the top 10 list of everything and anything will be starting back up Monday. This week's subjects will be about the top 10 greatest Atlanta Blade players of all time, and then pitchers on Mondays the players, Tuesdays the top 10 greatest Atlanta Braves pitchers of all time, Tuesday, Wednesdays the top 10 greatest Montreal Expos pitchers, players, Thursdays the top 10 Montreal Expos pitchers, and Fridays will be kind of a special one because it's Black Friday, the top 10 stores that are no longer in existence that I miss the most. And there'll be more and more. Good day, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Bye now.